are you invoking something larger than yourself? For example, it's the difference between going on a hike and going on a pilgrimage.
Okay.
They look the same.
Yeah.
If you saw it from a bird's eye view, they are people walking. But one is going for a walk and the other is going to do something because it is somehow already imbued in meaning.
Thank you for joining me this morning, Tiu.
It's such a pleasure, Tom.
Yeah. Can you explain to people, we'll start off with the outfit. What's the outfit about?
This is just this is my pajamas. It kind of is.
Yeah.
So what you can't see is that on the back of this, there is I should really just show, shouldn't I? Yeah. Shall I stand up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Stand up, show 'em. Yeah.
So I'll explain first. So this cape, I consider my Jedi superhero skill sets. Like as soon as I put it on, I immediately start speaking like Yoda. I don't really, although I can.
You just did.
I can from now on. Yoda speak like.
Perfect. It's going to be a good 2 hours.
I was a professor
Yes.
at the College of Extraordinary Experiences in 2023, and that is a crazy, wonderful 5-day gathering conference, something hard to find the correct word for it. Experience for experienced designers in a 13th century castle in Poland. And I was one of the professors. And right before it started, they said, could you quickly come up with an opening ceremony? And I said, yes, actually, I can.
How soon before are we talking?
Oh, like 10 minutes.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I was like, so I came up with something and I was about to go out and do it. And they said, and I was going to do it in jeans and a t-shirt. And they said, you don't do this in civvies. Go and help yourself to our costume department. So I rifled through the costume department and this was on a hanger and I was like, that is mine. And then I basically kept it.
Right. And did your best Michael Gambon impression and...
forever. And so I later discovered that this extraordinary piece of clothing came from the Korean National Opera costume department, and on the back is a hand embroidered hokusai wave, which I'm going to show you, but also it's ridiculous. Like it's sort of 2 feet longer than I am, and so
do you know what it was used in, like what the production was? Or
no idea, but I do know that there was a second garment which was like a thing that you wore underneath it that I didn't. So
it was there, but you chose not to.
I don't remember seeing it,
that.
and
right,
then
okay.
and now I wish I had taken the whole caboodle. But this goes over everything.
It's insane. Yeah.
Okay.
No, show them.
Yeah. So I don't know how visible this is if I do this.
Yeah.
There you go. You can see that, right?
Yeah.
And of course we live on boats, Tom. So it feels like,
It's incredible.
it is incredible.
Yeah.
And
Very well done.
And sort of Flash Gordon-y shoulders.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I loved that
goes
film
with
growing up.
jeans. Anyway, there we are. That's what I'm wearing.
Great. Yeah. So all right. Let's let's explain to people why you were doing this experience in the first place and what your background is. Why were you what was it called?
The College of Extraordinary Experiences.
Yes.
Which is great, and I recommend it highly.
Why were you there? Why were you doing the opening ceremony?
So that year I was a professor. So I am a ritual designer.
Yes.
Which is a made-up job title. Everything that I do is under some sort of made-up job title. That's one of them. And so I create non-religious experiences around meaning and around moments of transition. And that can span from tiny little micro things like how do you cross the threshold into a new place, which was what that one ended up being, through to planning your own funeral, which was actually what I taught there as a professor. So it was up to me what I chose to teach, and I decided to take everybody through a planning your own funeral class,
Right.
which is really intense.
So you say non-religious, but I feel like from what you've told me before, they sometimes verge on religious, or like maybe to do with the universe, or like certain people's beliefs, but they're not. It's not a Catholic mass, is what you mean.
So I would say non-religious in that I don't adhere to any faith.
Sure.
But spirituality absolutely
Yes,
can be incorporated. But there's quite a big difference for me in terms of I'm not an interfaith minister. Like I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Hindu, I'm not. So if anybody wanted to have a ritual in those traditions, they would probably go to somebody who came from that tradition.
Right.
Whereas I still interrogate and am interested in the sacred and how that appears in our life and in our how we make meaning of things, but it isn't religious. There's a difference for me between religion, which is for me a structure which is often about behaviors and beliefs and
dogmatic.
Can be, not necessarily. I'm not actually anti-religion. It's just I'm not religious.
Yeah. Did you grow up religious or
No, I did not grow up religious, but I grew up in a very spiritually alternative life.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
So I learned to meditate when I was 6, and I was a devotee of an Indian guru when I was a kid.
Right.
And my mother was a very active spiritual seeker and kind of included me on all of her explorations. She had become a Catholic, and then she dabbled in all sorts of different things. Like we went to Sufi stuff every Sunday. And
While she was a Catholic, she was dabbling in other things.
By the time I came along, she'd kind of dumped the Catholicism, but we still occasionally went to church just because she liked being in sacred spaces, as do I. But no, it was much more hippie and weird than that.
Right. So how did you, ritual design, did you invent the term?
No, I didn't. I did make up the job title for myself, and it isn't quite right, honestly. I feel like it's a passing phase in terms of a label. It's not the one I'm going to be using for the rest of my days. But ritual design is a field. Experience design is a much bigger world than it used to be. So that experience design spans everything from immersive theatre, which I know you're experienced
I know
in.
you've worked with immersive theatre companies, and I've certainly done my fair share of workshops. I was speaking to an actor. I can't remember what show it was the other day. I was interviewing someone for the radio, and they were talking about, it was an immersive theatre play, basically. And I was like, New York, I've always found, for some reason, Manhattan just has the best immersive theatre I've ever found. I don't know why. There was a play that I went to years ago called Then She Fell. And it was about Alice in Wonderland, and there's a company called Third Rail Projects.
I'm familiar with Third Rail.
I think they're amazing.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got... what is it? I always forget the name of the company, but they do Sleep No More and things like
Punch
that.
Drunk.
Punch Drunk, yes. And they obviously have really big spaces, and they've got a big budget to do that with, and loads of actors and a massive cast every single time they do that. But I found that Third Rail, they just did it in an old house in upstate New York.
Yeah.
It took an hour and a half to get out there, but they designed the whole house and the space around Alice in Wonderland, and each room was kind of a different character's space. And they were then running a workshop. So I skipped class one day to go to this thing, and they were showing you how to, because I think it was the Mad Hatter's Tea Party room, and it was this big living room space, and they constantly moved tables and benches and furniture around. And so at one point you'd be talking to them normally like we are now, and then at one point they literally just pushed the table over, flipped it, and sat sideways and spoke to you like that. And they had different levels as well, so they put it in different spaces, and so you got to go in and do a 3-hour workshop with them and learn how to kind of create that kind of an environment. So experience design is incredibly similar, I imagine.
It's so immersive theatre is one big chunk of experience design, but it's usually for entertainment, right? Escape rooms for entertainment. And then you've got a spectrum where, there's now a whole, the College of Extraordinary Experiences is one of the places where people congregate around this particular field of expertise.
It was sort of like a Hogwarts.
It's Hogwarts.
Thing.
It's basically Hogwarts.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you get put in houses and you have capes and totally. It's completely Hogwarts. And then there's a thing called the WXO, which is the World Experience Organization, which also has a global community around it. There's all sorts of different expressions of it, but the majority, I would say, are still entertainment based or education based.
Right.
My bit is to do with meaning making and love and death and the stuff that is bigger than ourselves. How do you connect to something that isn't just to do with the human experience, but to do with what context you put the human experience in. It's a slightly odd way of putting it, but and there are people in that part too. So one of the examples is there's an amazing guy called Casper ter Kuile who is excuse me.
That's right.
There's an amazing guy called Casper ter Kuile who is at Harvard Divinity, and he set up something called the Sacred Design Lab in a partnership, and they're much closer to the area that I work in, and they work within spiritual innovation but non-religious.
Okay.
So they have that he writes a wonderful weekly Substack about ritual, and he wrote a book called The Power of Ritual. So he's also coming at it from this other perspective of, in a world increasingly erratic and confusing and devoid of meaning, how do we create meaning for ourselves out of our own lived experience, as opposed to going towards a fixed religion, most of which are several thousand years old. So they don't necessarily always have the most pertinent, relevant information for ourselves. So, and yet without them, there's no guide rails. So my work is around, how do you create meaning? How do you look back on a life well lived from your deathbed with the awareness that you are mortal, and take stock of what you've lived and make the moments as meaningful and as creative and as appreciative as you can? And so making moments of meaning is actually closer to what I actually do than designing rituals.
Okay, because you've spoken about it before. You obviously work with births and funerals and things like that. But is that the majority of your work, or is it more like the day-to-day creating meaning in a day-to-day meaningless life, basically?
It's both, but I don't do... So I used to be what's called a celebrant.
Yes.
I am no longer a celebrant.
Okay.
So celebrants specifically do weddings and funerals and occasionally baby namings. So they're like fulfilling the role of a priest for somebody who doesn't believe in a religion.
Sure.
I'm not a celebrant because I don't do weddings anymore, partly because weddings are a bit of a racket. It's really competitive. It's kind of stressful, but repetitive, which is the worst combination of things. And you have to like market yourself. They're quite brittle. I find not always. Sometimes they're totally magical, but often weddings are like quite performative. Everyone's really tired and stressed.
Everyone's
and skint.
trying to make their wedding. There's a really interesting thing I was chatting about with Neela. Is like everyone wants their wedding to be a particular way. We were talking about the bit where the groom and the bride feed each other cake, right? It started off as sort of an impromptu thing.
No, it comes from a deep ancient tradition.
Does it?
Actually, yes.
Tell me all about it.
No, you finish your sentence first. Then
Well, I was going to... okay, so maybe it comes from a deep ancient tradition, but I find it's this bit that people need to do now. And it's not even... They're trying to make it like it's just a spur of the moment thing, but it sometimes feels like this weird forced bit.
Yeah.
And then if it goes wrong, and then the whole thing where like the bride goes, I don't actually want to do the thing where we shove cake into each other's faces because I've spent hundreds of pounds doing my makeup and having a whole makeup team. And the guy's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then he just shoves it into her face, and then it just ruins the moment. So people are...
Oh my God, what a terrible start to a marriage.
Yeah.
Have you witnessed that?
I have witnessed that, yeah. I mean, it's a big thing on like Instagram and stuff as well. It's like just compilations of brides being very upset because... you've basically ruined their moment and they need to go get their makeup done all over again. But I find I don't know, people have a wedding and they've got this idea of how the day needs to go. And it should just be a really nice day that you have with people. Oz was like that. It was really chill. We had, I think, 6 people there. It was very small, civil marriage in Glasgow. And it was just a really nice day. We went to a nice restaurant. We didn't really, it wasn't a particularly nice restaurant. It was just a nice area of town and a place we'd never been to before. And we're like, why don't we go there? Because it's a beautiful part of town and we'll just have a nice meal, and that was it. And it was perfect. But I feel like with a big wedding, which most people do, they've got like cues that they need to hit. And so it sort of feels like you're walking through stages. Yes.
So yes, but, yes, I have found that when I have worked with a couple who want to treat the ritual aspect of the wedding as something which is personalized and meaningful, where they're making vows that actually are quite tough for them to say, or call them to step to a different standard, that becomes really rich. So one of the reasons I don't do weddings anymore is because the way that I do them is days and days of deep couples therapy.
Sure. You did.
Which I love because I'm not a couples therapist, but I'm nosy and I'm creative. So the way that I used to do it would be to get very personal with a couple.
Sure.
And really understand why the hell they're getting married.
Which is what you should do that. I didn't have that. I feel like that's vital. Our guy, he did this thing. He took this, I might have told you this already, but he took off our rings at one point, and because we were quite young when we got married, he was trying to make some reference to Harry Potter. But he did it worse. He confused, because he was like young people these days in magic and Harry Potter, but he confused Harry Potter with Lord of the Rings. And so he said something along the lines of the one ring to rule them all, which was a horrible thing because I guess our rings are sort of non-traditional. We got them from Etsy, some Ukrainian seller at the time, and they were hammered because we don't like the sort of traditional
made by elves.
Yeah, and so he said this thing and he kind of didn't finish his sentence. He had a binder and he was on script the whole time. Yeah. And then at one point he thought he'd go a bit off script and like make a joke and really reference
shouldn't have.
culture. And he's like, the one ring to rule them all. And the whole room, and my dad's filmed the whole thing. The whole room went, what? And he went back to the binder and just went back to and never really referenced or finished the thought.
We might need a ritual to rename your rings.
I think so.
That you...
Yeah. There's a weird competition. I've always wondered why it's there. Yeah.
So I believe that there are certain times when words are imbued with meaning that add a different kind of level of power to the words. And wedding vows are one of those times. Naming a child is another.
Sure.
But there's this thing where the belief and the words overlay. And so obviously we don't have to do a ritual to undo the power of Sauron from your marriage.
It's there.
But maybe just write it. Let's take it. But there's something about at least acknowledging the fact that the words that you say when you're in that particular context have a certain energy to them. And so when I used to work with couples, this is all sounding like I want to do weddings again. I do not.
Sure.
When I used to work with couples, the journey was partly for me to understand what the nature of their relationship was. As if it were a third entity. Yes. So like you plus Neela creates a particular combination of positive and negative traits that you could almost turn into a creature.
Yes.
And you could go, that energy that is our relationship only exists because the two of us are in a relationship. You plus somebody else or her plus somebody else, and they'd be different creatures. And if you are going to have a wedding around strengthening that, part of it is you need to understand what vows it needs to have in place to hold it together when it breaks. Because life happens. And so it's helpful to create vows that are absolutely unique to the particular shadow and light that your relationship holds.
Sure.
And that means that the journey to get to those vows is a pretty deep and intimate conversation about why are you doing this? And if you're just going for the legal bit, you don't need to do that. If you're bringing in the meaning making, the ritual side, then you need to go deeper.
Right.
So this is like, it's a really helpful delineation actually between why we need ritual or why we may not have ritual. Marriage is technically, it's a legal binding agreement, and that is totally fine. Like it has tax status and it has all these other things that going to the registry office covers. If you have a faith, if you believe that there is a spiritual element to this, if you have anything numinous other going on, then a ritual starts to address that stuff. And so when you are a wedding celebrant, there are certain rules which are interesting to me where there are absolute divisions between church and state. If you go to do a ceremony in a wedding registry office, you cannot have any hint of anything religious. You can't even play Ave Maria. Like you cannot say any prayers.
Sure.
You can't quote anything that has that even slightly sniffs of anything spiritual or religious. And you have to do it in the hours of daylight. You have to be under a roof in a building that has been officially not consecrated, but I can't think of the word, but made available to this particular purpose. There are all these rules in place. If you want to have a wedding that is, for example, outside under the stars, skating backwards in a figure of 8, singing Frank Zappa songs and, you know, like doing voodoo chants, come to me. You know, like that's where I meet you. I will not do anything legal. I cannot. I'm not allowed to. And therefore, everything that becomes other is the area that I work within or used to work within. I don't do weddings anymore because not everybody understands that distinction, and my work is actually better met by other kinds of transitions where people are more overtly curious about what is it to live a meaningful life. So death is still really interesting to me, but I don't do funerals either. But I do help people to design their own.
You have done not maybe funerals, but
I have done funerals.
You have done funerals.
I even trained as an undertaker.
Right. And is that related to what you're doing now, or that's completely different?
Kind of, only insofar as it gave me a real appreciation for the fact that most people want to have something that is personal and creative and often natural, not always, that brings in their personality, that allows their friends and their family to speak from the heart about them, or that has a sense of humor around it, or that has a sense of something more powerful than is just possible when you have the very limited 25 minutes in a crematorium slot, which is the norm here, which is horrible. So I learned from all sorts of different people, but a really wonderful radical undertaker called Rupert Callender, who basically has been at the forefront of pioneering human-centered funerals. And so I shadowed him and I learned so much. But also
human-centered funerals?
Human-centered funerals, as in like, not scented, centered.
Centered. Yeah, okay. I was like...
No. But no, that's a really good point, because you do have to manage the smell.
I was going to say, I feel like they do that in some countries.
But they have flowers.
Yeah. Human-centered. Okay. Which means what? How is a funeral? How is a traditional funeral not human-centered?
So often it's process-centered. Okay. So you will go a crematorium in the UK. They have half-hour slots.
Yes.
So you have, by the time you've got in there with the body and you've put the body down, you've got 20 minutes because you've got to get out again before the other lot come in.
It's the same thing with a wedding. Is like you get like wedding venues, and by the time you're leaving, the other bride and groom are just stood outside waiting, sort of just stood outside of your pictures.
Yeah.
And you go around the corner to take pictures in the beautiful spot, and then they're going to take pictures in the beautiful spot, and it just feels a bit machine. Yeah, like you said,
conveyor
machine
belt.
process. Yeah,
exactly. And so there's. There are lots of really wonderful, thankfully, people who are pioneering in the death industry. Like there are all sorts, especially in the UK and in the Netherlands and in other little pockets. But the standard thing is to be put into this conveyor belt. Yeah. And the problem is that when people have experienced a bereavement, they're often so shocked or exhausted or sad, they don't think to question. And actually there's something quite comforting about a conveyor belt, because you go, oh, this is how you do it. But that conveyor belt doesn't necessarily meet their need for the pace that they need to have in order to understand what's just happened to them, or to be with the body, or to take their time over choosing things. And there's this rush that isn't necessary. And so one of the things I learned from this guy was there is no rush.
Right.
They're already dead. You can take your time over this stuff, and you can choose something that feels meaningful and real. You can also create your own. It is really helpful to design your funeral long before you die. It's quite fun.
I feel like with weddings and funerals in particular, like I think it was around the 20th century, you start to get so many industries around that. People realize it's a big way to make money. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, the reason we have modern funerals the way they are today, it was the Civil War in America, and people wanted the bodies of their dead loved ones to come home, and so people would go around battlefields like a day after the battle, and they would find people's bodies and then offer for a fee to sort of process them and put them in a casket, and in the funeral industry sort of became what it is now. And that's why I think it's still generally illegal here and in America for you to bury your own dead.
Yes and no. And the origin story here is different. So the origin story here is the Victorian culture changed the way that we experienced anything
Right.
unseemly. So up until the Victorians, death and birth was a community activity.
Sure.
So often the same person who would birth the babies and wash the babies and bring them into the world was the same person who would wash the dead bodies. And like there's usually a woman, an elder woman in the community who was like that kind of person. You'd often build your own coffin. You'd make your own shroud, or your partner would. You'd often have a wake where your body was laid out in your living room and everyone would sit around and have a drink. And then the body would be carried down the street and the whole community would. So that was the norm. And that's actually the norm in all sorts of cultures.
Yeah.
But the Victorians pulled a veil and were like, no, we can't possibly. We'll allow somebody else who's all togged up in a fancy outfit to handle this and make it also, it's all quite demure and formal and stately. This is obviously the higher income bracket, but nonetheless,
I was going to say something that like maybe royals were doing, and then it sort of filtered down to everyone else.
It's just a cultural shift from people being able to be raw and present and with the body, with the physical aspect of birth and death, and not so much the royals, just anything to do with any sort of class. The poorer you were, the more likely you were to have to deal with your own dead. And the minute you get into a certain income bracket, you bring somebody in to handle that. And that then became the norm.
Right.
So now it is sometimes the case that people will make a shroud for a loved one. It's possible. You can make a wicker coffin for yourself if you like.
Course,
You can. Yeah. You can get a cardboard coffin and decorate it, and you can involve your community. And it's beginning to become more and more possible for communities to get involved in the actual design, but people don't realize they can.
Yeah.
And so when somebody dies in hospital, there's often this, even the people in the hospital don't realize that you have agency in this. You don't have to follow the rules.
They do it all the time. They're just used to people dying around them, and then they go, okay, well, this is what we need to do. And obviously you're dealing with people who are grieving. So you're like, right, we're going to get you on this track so we can sort of help you through this process.
But it's actually not the only way to do it, but you need to have a little bit of information and education in order to even know that you have any choice, and you really do. So there's funny things that I didn't realize until I started working in this world, where, for example, by law, you don't actually have to bury anybody at all. Legally, it's gross.
You can just keep them.
Yeah. You can, until they become...
Is it not the thing where, because I remember our cat died a couple of years ago, and I remember reading something online about, who you need to inform that your cat or pet has died. You can't just bury it in your backyard because there's all sorts of, property and, maybe sanitation laws around that, and you can do it, but I think it's quite a lengthy process as opposed to going through the official channels.
Well, obviously, you don't want to just accidentally have dead bodies piling up without, there are reasons why it's not okay.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But there are also natural burial grounds, and they have their own rules.
Yeah.
So those often have things like you have to have a biodegradable coffin, and you cannot have any headstone. So you can mark the grave with a tree. Exactly. Yeah. And they vary, but those things are designed that you don't really know where the grave is in 30, 40 years. It's just part of a forest. And that is, that's another way of doing it. I recently designed a ritual for a theoretical ritual. It actually hasn't happened, for a client who has what's called a resumation machine, which is water cremation. So instead of so that's a new, more environmentally friendly way to shift from one form into another.
So do you still get, what do you get at the end of that? Is
you
it
get
still ashes?
Ashes are made from, so at the end of the cremation process and also the resumation process, you're left with the bones.
Right.
And the bones get put through a macerator, and that's what becomes the ashes. And this may be apocryphal, but I choose to believe this to be true. Could be absolute bollocks. Apparently, the weight of the ashes is equal to your birth weight.
Really?
I don't know that that's necessarily demonstrably true, but there's something very neat about that. I was told. I didn't look into it too deeply because I wanted just to keep that perfection of that symmetry.
Okay, yeah. I feel like I could break that apart, but I'm not going to.
I'm sure you could. Let's not. Let's just, it's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, people don't weigh ashes very much, and they wouldn't necessarily think to correlate the two. But nonetheless, I quite like the alpha and omega, the completion, the birth. So just all the way back to the ritual design, rituals tend to be about thresholds between one state and another.
Okay.
So, for example, when you're getting married, the journey is you're going from two people in a committed relationship into a legally bound unit. There's a shift. You could still be in a committed relationship for 30 years, but getting married changes sometimes your name, sometimes your ability to vote or move or travel or whatever, but also it sort of turns you into a family, right? And so the words that you choose to frame that bound up that agreement in some sort of promise that I find really interesting. Death, funerals is the transition where the body, it's the last time that the body of the loved one is in the community that they came from.
Right.
So after the funeral, the body has been released and the community remains. So it's the goodbye to that. So it's the threshold across which you cannot return in terms of physical embodiment, but the spirit of the person lives on.
Right.
A name ceremony, which I've not done many of, but I've done a few. That's where the child goes from being an essentially like a sort of brand new being into their identity. And often that comes with the good wishes of the grandparents and the parents and the godparents and like a promise to guide and help and support them.
The initial sort of rite of passage.
Initial rite of passage, and it doesn't exist in every culture by any means. And they vary again, like depending on where you are. But those are the big ones. So celebrants do those ones. They're the ones that everyone kind of recognizes as necessary. My work is now everything else. So it's like, how do you create thresholds, or rather, how do you create moments of meaning around thresholds that may need some sort of emotional reckoning, but you're so stressed and so busy that you never stop to think, or you never take time to be able to transition. So, for example, menopause. Not that I'm in it.
Yeah.
And I haven't ritualized it. It's a really interesting thing. For me, what the things that I have received is so my mum died when she was 49, and when I turned 50, massive ritual, like on and on and on and on, like because that for me was a really big deal for me to like basically be passed the baton from one recognizable track to something brand new that has not been modeled for me before. That was for me a really important thing. But then you've got tiny micro rituals, like how do you start your day, and then how do you complete how do you step across the threshold from work to not work, especially if you work from home. How do you shift from one mentality to another? How do you let go of a project that you have completed? Like, how do you say goodbye to something? How do you celebrate, the end of chemo? They ring a bell. That's a mini ritual. There's all sorts of things that are to demarcate. There's massive cultural ones. We've just had the Chinese Lunar New Year.
Yeah.
I haven't actually ever been to the festival around that.
I didn't even know it was happening until I've got one Chinese friend who she posted about it on Instagram. I was like, oh Christ, I didn't even realise that was there.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a big thing.
Yeah,
and it's ritualized, and you could argue that it's an arbitrary energetic shift, that it's only a thing because we all agree that it's a thing.
Like New Year,
like New Year or astrology generally, like depends where your belief systems are. You might have tons of reason to think that these configurations of calendar dates mean something, like a birthday or an anniversary, or they might just be empty spaces which mean nothing. But we as human beings, I think, benefit from putting moments of reflection and demarcation to interrupt the vastness of our experience. And that's what rituals can do.
Do you ever find that you meet someone who is looking for your services, and perhaps they might not be religious, but maybe they hold beliefs that you don't hold, I guess, or agree with? And do you have any challenges around that you have to sort of navigate when you're doing that? Maybe someone has a certain belief in astrology that you don't match, and you need to figure out you need to like learn about that and educate yourself to...
That's a really good question. I'm pretty adaptable. So I will go towards, within reason. I've never been asked to do anything so dark that I have to question my own moral compass.
Burying bodies for Scientologists out in the Nevada desert?
Never Never.
No,
No, not yet.
Okay. I know a couple of people you
I've
could
been
speak
buried
to.
alive,
Yeah.
but that's
Okay,
another conversation.
right.
The moral compass that I operate from is around generosity and empathy and creativity and wonder also. It's not all about ritual, by the way. Like ritual is one leg of my work, but there are two others, and creativity is one and wonder is another, and they do interlock, but the ritual stuff is probably what I'm kind of most known for, but it's not only that.
Sure.
Because creativity goes into how do you live a life creatively. Making experiences for yourself or for others is one expression of that. But just to your question about have I ever had to push back, in order to understand somebody else's worldview, I will go quite deeply into what it is that is important to them, and then use that as the beginning. So, for example, if somebody, I once did a wedding. Weddings keep coming. I once did a wedding where the vows that they made, they'd already been together 23 years, but the vows they made included committing to being together in the next life. I was like, are you sure? Because you might want to change it up a little bit.
Other people. You seen this guy? He's fit.
But no, they were really clear. And I was like, okay. I mean,
Right.
I'm all open to that stuff. But I
Sure.
was like, that's a very clear vow that is going in the direction of a belief that the reincarnation is so solidly real to that person that they're going to create a vow out of it. I was like, okay, that's really different to most people. I've never done that before or since.
Do you ever find that you go down this big route of like learning about someone, and it sounds similar to acting in a way, because you really like dive into a character and try to understand them from the inside out. Do you ever find that you go down a route and maybe you've got a couple of different options that you don't really know how you're going to go about it? They both maybe sound, or even more, like two or more options, and you're like, they all sound correct. And how do you go about picking what you're going to do? Because I imagine it's a different experience, and obviously you're building on what you've done before, but it is a different thing because it's a new person,
It's
and it's a new
always
situation
new.
every single time.
It's always new. I think that's partly why I like doing what I'm doing, is because there's no fixed path here. I'm making this up as I go along, including the job title.
Yeah.
And that's something which I think could be terrifying if you didn't enjoy it. But if anything, I prefer hacking my way through the undergrowth with a imaginary machete as opposed to following the dictates of faith, for example. Like I went to there was a funeral of a fairly distant relative quite a few years ago, and it was a Christian funeral.
Right.
And actually, she wasn't that distant a relative, but we didn't know each other that well.
Sure.
So I went along to the funeral, and I'm fascinated by religion. So I'm really kind of interested in Christianity.
Yeah.
I'm not Christian, but I'm like, what
I
is
think they're all
underneath it all?
fascinating.
Yeah.
Like you can take things from it. Yeah.
And anyway, I was asked to give a reading, which I did, the Corinthians Through a Dark Glass Darkly thing, which I love. But then afterwards, I got chatting to the vicar, and we had this brilliant conversation where when he understood what I did, which it took a while because it's pretty weird,
Yeah.
and
We're still not there yet.
we're still not there yet, are we, Tom? We may never get there. But when he understood that I created bespoke rituals, he said, but isn't that exhausting? Wouldn't you like a guidebook? I was suddenly like, that's never even occurred to me. You've got a Bible.
Yeah.
You know exactly what to say and how to say it. I was like, oh my God, that would be, in a way, what a relief that would be. But on the other hand, no thanks. And it was just this really illuminating moment where he was like, isn't it tiring to make it up from scratch every time? I was like, yes. And I like that.
Yeah.
I like the creating from nothing, which also there's a lot of problematic cultural appropriation in this field.
Right.
Because you could argue, and I do, that there is vast wisdom available in all of these cultures. And in order to utilize what there's already been practiced for many thousands of years, you need to pay homage to whoever it is that you're stealing from,
Sure.
and then incorporate it
Right.
into what you're doing with an honoring of that. But it is appropriation. So which I name if I do it. I go, this is appropriated, and I'm going to just get in front of that and say, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's also really interesting to me to come back to a blank canvas and start from scratch, knowing that there is other things that influence that creation, including what's happening in the world, or what season it is, or what colors or scents or flavors, or, you know, things that happen to be pertinent in that moment. But there is something about acknowledging the fact that ritual is as ancient as human beings.
Yeah, which is great because you do it now and you've done it for a while. But what was it like doing this at the start? Like, how did you just start doing ritual designing, or did you do something that came before and it sort of led into that? Like,
so it's really hard to pinpoint because I've been making shit up for probably about as long as you've been alive,
sure,
Tom.
Sure.
But the journey went, I've had 3 different lives, essentially, professionally. First was a singer-songwriter.
Yep.
Second was closer to this. So second was I set up a not-for-profit in 2005 where I created experiences that are around parents and children connecting through play in nature. And that project got a big chunk of funding from the lottery, and I was able to practice for many years actually how to create an experience that take people through. They come in one state and they leave in another. The particular journey that they went on was parents remembering what it's like to be a child, and then realizing that they have a masterclass in their own living room in the form of their 7-year-old kid who's really good at making up stories and building dens and having pillow fights and like using their imagination and being curious and being free. So that particular journey was focused on the relationship between parents and children and the access point that parents could have to their own creative imagination and wonder.
Right.
At the end of that, one of my teammates said, God, we'd be good at funerals and weddings, wouldn't we? And I was like, oh my God, yeah, we would actually. Because we'd already developed this thing where we would take people through this journey that would shift, that would open them imaginatively and emotionally to shift their perspective so that they could see the magic in the mundane, so that they could experience the wonder. And I was like, that skill set could be deployed in all sorts of different things. So that conversation planted the seed going, this is transferable. And then I realized that the term celebrant was one that lent itself to that kind of practice. So I signed up to do a celebrant training because I was like, I may as well learn how you apply this within those particular realms. And then while I was doing this, in the very beginning of that process, a mate of mine asked me if I would marry her to herself. And I did. And
what was her want for doing that?
She'd been single, and she had had a really quite intense 7-8 year journey at that point of personal development. And she'd done a lot of really extraordinary work and exploration. And she said that had she been on that journey with somebody else, she would want there to be some sort of acknowledgement of how far they'd come.
Right.
So that was her initial thing. Plus, she wanted to make vows to be her expanded best self in the company of her friends and community.
Okay.
Which actually is really quite a powerful thing to do. I don't want to get married to myself, but if you think about the way that we often frame our commitments to others as being super important, it's actually really an interesting idea to go, what vows would I make to myself? And how can I do that in a way that I'm held accountable? So she and I kind of ideated around creating her wedding and her vows. I mean, it was a whole thing.
Was this were there other people there? Were there witnesses?
There was it was probably about 50 people.
Oh, wow.
It was
Right,
a weekend in a beautiful farm in Devon, which was donated by a friend of hers. She had 7, not bridesmaids, what did she call them? Maids of honor. No, she had I can't remember. There was 7 best women. Okay. 7 best women and a man of honor. And I won't go into the details of the ceremony because it was her thing, but it was this pretty extraordinary experience. And then that summer, I gave a talk at a festival about some of the rituals that I was working on, including that one. And a journalist came up to me afterwards who'd been in the crowd and said, "Can I write a story about this?" And I said, "It's not my story. I can check with my friend. And if she says yes, then I'll put you in touch." And she did. And he then wrote a piece about her that ended up being on the front page of The Guardian. And then it turned into this absolutely mental global Twitter shitstorm for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But in 2014, the self-marriage of my friend became this bizarre thing. It suddenly, it went all over the world.
Yeah.
And
So did you get loads of attention after that?
she got more than I did. It was quite horrible. It was a really, I was so new to this. It was like the very beginning of this journey. And I was all like wide-eyed going, hooray. And then I was suddenly going, oh my God,
Yeah.
the internet's a horrible place.
It's also like such a particular thing to a person. It was like, 140 characters Twitter used to be, right? So you can't put that into a tweet and then just expect people to understand what's going on.
And it was, what was interesting about it was it suddenly propelled everything. It propelled this idea of creating rituals into a completely different conversation. It propelled her into like international talk shows and stuff. It went into this, and then it's all long gone.
Right.
Like it's 2014.
It had its moment.
Had its moment. It was brief.
Right.
But it was, what it did was it carved out my sense of going, the unrecognized rituals, that one being around commitment to becoming a better self, is something that captures the imagination. And it's actually, self-marriage is a whole thing. It's called sologeny. There's a whole practice. It's not, yeah. She didn't make it up.
Yeah.
There's a whole, sologeny.
Never heard of this.
It's a thing. Why would you have, unless you were...
Do you shove cake into your own face at a self-marriage?
That's a really good point. We can work with that, Tom. If you
didn't do that?
We didn't do any cake shoving of any kind.
You can hire my services whenever you need.
If you would like to shove cake into your own face, Tom, I don't think you need a ritual.
I do on a regular basis.
I was going to say, like, we don't need to overcomplicate this.
Yeah. If anyone criticises me, I'm just marrying myself over and over again.
Loving the commitment.
Yes. Making myself a better person.
With cake.
Yes.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So the journey to do this, I think, came out of, just professionally speaking, the journey that I had been through with my not-for-profit about parents and kids, transitioning into, celebrants, and then transitioning into this self-marriage thing, which was like, hang on, everybody needs these completely different rituals for all sorts of different aspects. Or they don't need them, but it's an interesting exercise to go, where is their meaning that is lacking? Yeah. And so prior to that, just to stretch it all the way back into the more distant past, it was really more out of life itself being lived as a creative act. And that I find permeates all the other things as well, not just the ritual side. So that also came out of, we're going to die. And you may as well
get used to that idea.
Get used to that idea. But not only that, there's something about the awareness of the brevity of life, sharpening your potential appreciation for what is, and allowing that to then become informed by meaning and creativity and exploration and making. I've had a lot of death, like a lot. I've had, I think, more than my fair share, frankly.
Do you think that's given you that perspective?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's like I don't really take this for granted. And given that this is a skin suit that is, I'm like my skin suit. It's
just a big water balloon.
It's a big water balloon with a cape.
Yeah, a cloak with a wave on it.
And that's it. That's reason to play. It's a reason to go, this is finite. And then what would play look like? What would meaning look like? If you can't do it in a big, I'm going to give up my job and run off and do something, how can you simply turn your walk to the office into a moment of connection with yourself and others? How can you shift into meaningful conversations with the people that you love and have a genuine connection? How can you turn off the noise? How do you ignore the phone a little bit? Whatever it is, to be able to come back into the present and then feel aliveness and then live from there.
So like ritual, which is not the perfect word for it, is all about finding presence and finding finding your presence in a day-to-day life and making meaning of it, especially in a I said meaningless world maybe 20 minutes ago, but maybe in a world that is sucking the presence out of your everyday existence.
Yes. And I'm no saint here. I am just as likely as anybody to be double screening crap on Netflix and then Instagram. I'm not like living in some divine state of presence the whole time. What you said that's really interesting there is the overlay of presence and meaning. So mindfulness, I would argue, and the fact that it's now so prevalent, which is, I think, brilliant. Culturally, the normalization of having some way of coming into your lived awareness is just, that wasn't around when I was young. It's now, it's okay, it's not great that it's corporate, but it's great that it's normal. So mindfulness is the starting point. That's like the base coat. It's like you go, in this moment, how am I? How is my body? Do I experience any pain? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I hot? Am I cold? Am I breathing all the way in, or am I breathing very shallow? Hi.
Which most people don't do.
No.
Yeah.
So there's something about mindfulness just being like a micro reset into the what is. Ritual is a layer of meaning that you place on top of that, or the imagination, right? So it isn't simply about coming present. That's the start. It's about what you then add on to that in terms of meaning, and it could be magical thinking in some cases. It could be any number of things that go on top, but you can't do it without the baseline of the presence.
Sure.
There's also, I have to often push back against a misuse of the word ritual. So ritual is often ascribed to any repeated behavior. And people go, my morning coffee is a ritual.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a ritual.
It's a buzzword now. Yeah.
It's a buzzword that is unfortunately misusing what could be a powerful word. So the difference is, are you invoking something larger than yourself? For example, it's the difference between going on a hike and going on a pilgrimage.
Okay.
They look the same.
Yeah.
One, if you saw it from a bird's eye view, they are people walking. But one is going for a walk and the other is going to do something because it is somehow already imbued in meaning. Like that is the clearest definition. Like there's wine o'clock and then there's taking Holy Communion in a church.
Sure.
Physically, you're sipping wine. One is, it could have a ritualistic aspect if it is to do with a particular, maybe it's your birthday, or maybe it's a conversation that you need to have or something, and there's another layer on top of it. But the physical action of sipping wine is completely different if you happen to believe that you are sipping the blood of Christ.
Do you find now, because with the younger generation, obviously, there's all this talk about kids being on screens all the time. Are you finding that, are people of a younger generation coming to you to have a ritual in their life or find that presence? Or
no, but I think we're all screen addicted.
Yeah.
And I imagine that by the time, no, I don't get that many. Is that true? There is a classic around teenage rites of passage.
Okay.
Which I've never actually done.
Like becoming
a man or a woman.
Sure. Okay.
So the transition in many cultures, there is a way of stepping away from the innocence of childhood and stepping towards the complexity and sometimes darkness of adulthood. So
which isn't a thing in our culture, I find. Like it's a big thing talked about in like South American tribes where there's the rite of passage of becoming a man or a woman, but I find that in our culture you kind of just do.
It's lacking.
Yeah, you graduate from uni and now you're an adult, and there's no.
Well, graduation is a ceremony.
Yeah.
But like to embrace the dark side, you probably need to, like often, especially for the male rites of passage, they have an element of danger or violence or bloodletting or confronting a fear or like you might die. You know what I mean? Like the really hardcore ones involve kind of going into the desert for 3 days and nights without water, that kind of thing where you're withstanding something that proves your ability to overcome hardship.
Yeah.
I've never done anything like that.
I think that's a thing maybe in more like, for example, tribal communities, because they need to know that you were a boy, for example, and now you're a man who can contribute and help the rest of the community survive in a way. And I feel like that's certainly part of it. I imagine there's other elements to it, but it's not a thing. And
it's not a thing unless you include gang culture.
Gang culture, 100%.
Because that also has a whole ritualistic. She says, like I don't know for myself.
No.
This is speaking.
Well, now it's all online, isn't it? Like I was chatting with someone yesterday because I think I told you before I wrote a play a few years ago about incels and toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
And there's this whole thing where men are getting sucked into this online world because it's almost what's the word? There's sort of hazing rituals to become this sort of a thing, and if there's no other outlet to become a man or a woman, there's incels and there's femcels, which are becoming more popular as well, which is just female incels. And there's a group and there's a community like a gang. You grow up in a community where for example, a poor black community in America where there's gang culture, and there are people who are older than you that you want to sort of impress. And so you become a part of that culture, and maybe you do something terrible to join that culture.
Sure.
So you don't find that there are people who are like trying to come to you to find the positive side of that situation?
I have had conversations with other people who have done versions of it. I've never done it.
Okay.
So I had a really interesting conversation a few years ago now with somebody who'd done it with a big group of girls over a long period of time in Australia. And she'd taken, and I would love to actually work on that sometime. Like I've never done it, but there is a transition that's lacking for the boys ones. I think it is gendered, actually. I think that you probably need to be ushered into that through a masculine holding, and there are men's groups that do it. So I have a mate who used to work with me in my not-for-profit who has held that space within. There's basically a group of guys who volunteer their time to take a group of teenage boys over some sort of threshold, which they design together, and they do it as a community. So the boys have men who they can bring their rage and frustration and loneliness and confusion to, who is not a parent. So there's something about a community holding it, but it is quite gendered. Interestingly, one of my godchildren is, she's Jewish and she grew up in California, and she did a really interesting version of this, which is called the Wilderness Torah. And they had a whole, I think a year, I might have this slightly wrong, but I think it was like a year of outward bound kind of skills. And then the culmination was she had to spend the night on her own in the forest,
Right.
Age 13, keeping a fire lit all night. And there were adults somewhere around. If she was in desperate need, somebody would be available, but nobody was with her.
Sure.
And she couldn't call anyone, and there wasn't anybody visible. So there was some sort of protective shield somewhere out there if there were a crisis, but basically she was on her own.
Sure.
And I remember her mum saying to me afterwards, she just came out of that with a whole new level of confidence. Like, wouldn't that be amazing to allow that?
I wish I had something like that. Yeah.
Well, with cake.
It's a bit of a different situation.
Tom, we can totally make this happen. I'm just
Make me
saying.
marry myself during this podcast over and over again. There's something that's been sticking in my brain this whole time, because you were talking about the ancient ritual of shoving cake into each other's face and where that comes from. I'm really curious to hear about that.
Yeah. Honey cake was one of the. There's many, many different bits of a wedding ceremony that come from old rituals, including the rings. Although traditionally only the woman would wear the ring, not the man.
Right.
And it was honestly from slave ownership. It's not great.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But the cake comes from an expression of abundance and sweetness.
Okay.
And so the idea being that honey cake, which would be the traditional thing, represented abundance and sweetness in the harvest of your marriage. So it was like you would feed it to each other. And also the fact that you're feeding it to each other rather than to yourself is that you're demonstrating with that action generosity.
Yeah.
So it's actually got quite a nice meaning.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's being used in this triggery way tells me that anybody who's doing that in their wedding ceremony is off to a bad start. And they shouldn't really be doing things that, if anything, set up an energy that's pretty different from the kind of energy
now
you want.
Filmed for the rest of your marriage and life. There must be something to be said about rituals that, like that one, that nobody knows what the ritual is anymore or where it came from. There must be something about losing. Rituals must lose their. It's like they talk about like nuclear symbols, right? When you've got like nuclear waste or something. It's like every 40 or 50 years, they need to redesign nuclear symbols on tanks because we get desensitized to them, and people play video games where you see them and you see them in films and you go, oh, that's just that funny symbol. And it's like, no, that means you're not supposed to go there. And so they need to redesign it. And there must be something to be said about doing that with rituals as well.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think is often the case is they become hollow edifices of the original power. And there's a really great example of this. There's a story about a Buddhist, let's say, monk. Not sure which monk or what tradition, but this particular Buddhist teacher, rather, had a cat.
Okay.
And the cat, when he'd be teaching his students to meditate, the cat kept coming in and bothering the students. So in order to prevent this from happening, they'd tie the cat up outside to a stick with a very long piece of string or rope, but short enough that the cat couldn't come in. So the meditation can happen in peace. Eventually the cat dies, another cat starts to, same thing happens with the other cat. Eventually the teacher dies, but now they can't meditate without a cat being put on a string. So it's like the cat being on the string becomes the note that is sounded in order for the meditation to begin, which is all the wrong way round. And it becomes all about the repetition of the hollow thing rather than what it is in the first place. There's another one which is apparently when Pinochet was visiting, I can't remember where I got this from, but Pinochet was visiting an army barrack somewhere, and a bench was freshly painted in his honour. But because the paint hadn't dried, they stationed a guard next to the bench to make sure that Pinochet didn't sit on the bench and end up with paint on his trousers. But forgot to relieve the guard. So forever after, there was a guard standing by this bench and everybody had forgotten why.
Oh, right.
So I think that's one of the reasons why I like creating rituals afresh, because I can't connect with religious rituals. I just don't have any, I personally don't have any religious faith, and therefore they feel hollow to me. I know that there's also something very powerful about having repetition through the ages. There's also there's two things going on at the same time. One is that too much repetition makes it into Pinochet in the bench. And the other thing is, if it's completely brand new every time, does it have the resonance of the ancestors?
Do you ever find that you get stuck doing something maybe the same way over again, and then you need to just completely break out? Do you ever find maybe you're doing something for a brand new person that maybe you did before, and you just need to shut it all down and start again?
For myself, I'm increasingly, as I am middle-aged, I'm increasingly a creature of habit, Tom. I don't really want to mess with my routine. There is something and sometimes I become aware of the fact that maybe I should mess with my routine. You know,
like you were talking about this morning, is like you need to take a holiday every now and then, because you can get stuck in stuff. And you could be doing some really exciting projects. I'm like you, I sort of do a lot of freelance work, very different work, but I love what I'm doing. And so you can just get stuck into it. And people always talk about if you have an office job, you need to take a break every now and then. It's like, well, I don't have an office job, but I do find after maybe a couple of months of doing something and really, really doing even what I love, you just get worn down, and you do need to, the classic thing is take a holiday.
Yeah. But one doesn't as a freelancer generally. I don't find. But do you know what I have been doing actually? This is my top tip for you.
Please.
And for me and for anybody else. I have been doing a thing on Sundays. I've taken to calling them Serendipity Sundays. Okay. This is my own experiment with myself. I started it in October of last year when I was hit by a particularly tricky work thing that meant I had to take stock, and I had sort of lost my own sense of inspiration. So I instigated this rule. On Sundays, as far as you possibly can, make no plans.
Okay.
First of all, so that you follow your whim moment to moment, which means you have to be tuned into your whim. So the second rule is don't be on your phone all day. I'm not rigid about the phone thing.
It's a very easy thing to do.
So it's be very, very discerning about phone use. So you could use your phone to look up access to an exhibition, but you cannot then spend an hour on Instagram stories. Okay, so number 1, make no plans.
Sure.
Number 2, follow your intuition. Number 3, minimize phone use. And number 4, leave the house.
I find that I just force myself into that position. I actually had it yesterday. I was doing loads of stuff and I had to get it done. And I was like, I just want to go out on a walk. I just want to walk in a direction for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And I have done that several times.
Yeah.
I'll just go and I just end up somewhere random or strange. I used to call it questing. It was my favorite thing. Either hungover or on a come down the next day. I'd often have a friend who'd stay the night and they needed to get back to their place.
Yeah.
And so rather than just saying goodbye,
You'd walk them home.
I'd walk them home. And what you do is you end up like, especially if you're hungover or you're on a come down, you do just get to that point where there's no anxiety.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the next day in that sort of pain more than the night before, because you would just go and wander down different streets and you'd find a cafe or a little like artist venue or something and you'd just chat to people and you'd be like, I didn't even know this was here, and you just give yourself that opportunity and that free space to go discover something else that you hadn't had before. So usually it is that thing where like I work for months and months and months and I'm like, I cannot stare at my screen anymore. I'm just going to go out and whatever I find, I'm just going to find.
So you can do, I like doing it for a whole day or half a day. Serendipity Sundays or Wonder Wednesdays is also effective.
As long as there's alliteration.
As long as there's alliteration and nothing else matters. But for me, it doesn't have to be that long, but it helps if I don't have too much of a time-bound thing on it. And it's worked brilliantly for me. Like I have to say, the first time I did it, and by the way, this is not unusual for me. It's just that the codification of it within my week and the absolute stringency with which I protect that time now, that's new. You know, like I create mini adventures. I work one-to-one with people. That's what I do with them often. You know, I do it for myself. I teach that skill set. It's adjacent to ritual, but it's not directly the same. Okay. But this is now a rule. Unless I have something that cannot be avoided, like I do these New Year classes and they're on a Sunday, I can't not. And there was a friend's 60th birthday lunch. I was like, I can't not do that.
I find if you don't make the space for that sort of a thing, if you don't get up, the first thing I do in the morning is I make sure the fire is still going, and then I sit down and I do a 10-minute, you know, Wim Hof?
Yes, I do.
I do a 10-minute breathing exercise. It's just a really good way to start the day. And I find if you don't make the space for that, you eventually 2 weeks will go by and you haven't got up and done your morning breathing. And you're like, oh God, I need to and like having like safety sort of like fail safes basically. I find that if I'm getting overwhelmed with life, a lot of the time I'm not stopping, I'm not taking breaks, and then that sort of spirals into not being grateful for what's around me. So I've got this sort of thing is like, if a couple of months have gone by and I've just been working and I'm not enjoying and maybe I'm jealous of what other people are doing, I will do my morning gratitude journal. And all you have to do is write 3 things. And it could be, what am I grateful for? I'm grateful that I have coffee. It's not like, the whole point is it's not big, important things.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm really grateful for my partner.
Yeah.
That I'm not alone in life and I'm not depressed because I've got a partner. It's like, oh, I'm grateful for coffee.
Fulfills all
because
of those.
The sun was shining for 2 minutes in the afternoon. And just doing that, it might not feel like you're doing anything in the moment, but if you do that for 2 weeks, you just find you're waking up with more gratitude.
Totally. Also, if you do it, I find, because I do that at the end of the day and I don't limit it to 3, I find that because I know that that's coming, I'm looking out for those things during the day. It therefore shifts your perspective so that you're actively seeking out evidence to prove that you have something to be grateful for. And that in itself is a really good game changer. There's tons of evidence around the neurological benefits of a gratitude practice and the way that can rewire your thinking.
Do you ever find that if you're in a place where you're really busy, you find it more difficult to connect with people? Like if your headspace is kind of all over the place and scattershot, and then you've got to sit down, suddenly you've got a meeting with someone because you've got the next weekly meeting or whatever it is, maybe you can't really focus because you do need to be more centered than the average person in order to do what you're doing.
I don't most of my work is really intense conversations. That is the majority. Honestly, the admin stuff that has to happen around them is the secondary piece. Most of what I'm doing is having magical conversations, honestly, which is great. I get paid to do that, I do work primarily one-on-one. So the majority of my income is people who come to me. Coaching isn't really accurate, but the people who come to me at a point of transition, maybe they are, for example, they're retiring and they want to kind of gather up the journey that they've taken and they want to shift into a legacy focus. Or it could be that they've burnt out. That's very common. People who have burnt out and who've lost their ability to attune to their intuition or find their creativity or remember what the wonder is like or even just get outside sometimes. All of those things, they've forgotten how to do it. So, or they may have an idea for a podcast or a book or an album, and I'll help them to shepherd their energies towards birthing something. So one of the other job titles that I have, which is made up but not by me, is idea doula.
Okay.
As in, a doula is you know what a doula is?
No.
Oh, a doula is a term given to a non-medical midwife.
Okay. Right.
So the midwife will make sure that you're doing all the stuff that needs to happen medically, but the doula will sit alongside you in terms of the emotional, psychological, all of the other aspects of giving birth, and they will accompany you through that journey. There are death doulas also. So death doulas are people who shepherd people through the death experience. Idea doulas, I am the only one. It's entirely made up term. I help people birth ideas. So one of the things that I'm good at is getting into that imaginative liminal space and then grabbing hold of somebody's excitement and inspiration and helping them to find a way to bring that into reality. So it could be an idea that they've been playing with for a while and then going, let me help you to actually imagine there's loads of seeds on the wind and a seed might land on your thinking and it might blow away again. But the one that you want to actually harvest and make into a real thing, sometimes helpful to have support in that. And there are various different processes that I use for my own creative practice, including relating to that idea as if it were a sentient being.
Right.
So you can kind of communicate with it. So you can go, I don't know what to do with this, but I can talk to it as if, and I can ask it. We might even find that we can figure out the being that your podcast is. So you go, podcast, who do I want to have on next? Or how do you want to progress? I'm being slightly facetious, but I'm kind of not. Like the essence of a project can be an imaginal tool. But all the way back to what you were saying about having to be present, I have a non-negotiable morning ritual.
Right.
I write morning pages.
Yeah.
And it's not just morning pages, there's other bits to the ritual as well. But essentially, I do that every single day. And I have done since I was your age.
Do you ever find that doesn't do the job? Like what happens when you're having a bad day? What do you do?
It's the most important time to do it. It's a little bit like having a check-in with the part of yourself that has altitude on the situation. So even if you're having a bad day, it's where I would get comfort and a different perspective or just space to think it out or a conversation with an aspect of myself or an aspect of the divine or something that can bring some softening to the harsh edges or can bring some hope or some love or some humor. Honestly, sometimes it's like it just helps me to figure things out. I do often invite my clients to do it, and if they are unaccustomed to having that space, it often is the case that for the first few weeks of doing it is actually a pretty uncomfortable brain dump. So it's where you get all of the nastiest thoughts. You can, but I've been doing it such a long time, it doesn't work like that.
You must have like such a, do you know I think it's called the red car theory? The whole thing of like, if you go, oh, red cars are everywhere, you just start seeing red cars everywhere. Do you find that you go out if you go out on a daily basis and you just meet people in the street or in a cafe and you strike up a conversation, do things happen? Is your life like an acid trip? Do things just sort of come about?
My normal everywhere else. Totally. I absolutely have this baseline of wonder and magic and weirdness that for me is so normal that a guy I know called it the Tiu effect. It happens. I am occasionally on dating sites, and I have changed my dating moniker to serendipiter because that is basically what I do. So just it's engineering serendipity is one of the classes that I have taught because there are things you can put in place. One of the things is to have a practice like morning pages where you purge. But so the very first day that I did the Serendipity Sunday thing, it was a really good one. So I want to share it with you. So I was in quite a tizzy that day. I was freaked out by a particular challenge, and I woke up much too early and I was a bit sort of caffeinated and a bit highly strung. And I had this urge in my morning pages to go to Hampstead Heath, which isn't that close to where we are, but it's, you know, it's...
Was that something that you regularly do? Or you just like, today, the Heath?
That.
Right,
it was
okay.
that. It was today, the Heath. I need to go to the Heath. I love the Heath.
Yeah.
My childhood was around the Heath, so I know it very, very well. But it was like, get out of the house and go to the Heath. So I got out of the house and I went to the Heath. And as I was on my way to the Heath, I was like, I've got a friend who lives around here. I'm going to see if he's free. And he was my mate. He's a magician.
Sure.
He's also...
Of course he is.
Of course he is.
Look at you in this Jedi outfit. Of course your mate's a magician.
A magician? Only my friends. Only my friends. Anyway. So I call him up. And he's also somebody I can talk through work issues with. So we went for, it was really helpful. Like I even brought my laptop to go, can I explain what's going on?
Sure.
Anyway, we went for a walk. And it was about the direction that I wanted to take. I have a nascent not-for-profit, and it was just at this really tricky point in that day. And we went for a walk, and there's a hollow tree on the Heath. Do you know the hollow tree on the Heath?
The hollow tree.
There is a hollow... Tom, let me take you to the hollow tree sometime.
Please do.
The hollow tree is massive and big enough to climb inside and seats 3 people.
Right.
So I get inside the hollow tree, which I've been doing since I was a kid, and my mate comes in as well. And then this 6-year-old boy comes into the hollow tree. And he introduces himself. His name is Alex. And he immediately says, do you know there's a drum inside this hollow tree? And I said, I did not know there was a... And show me the drum. Sure enough, there's a bit of... So it's a very smooth inside of a tree trunk.
Sure.
There's a bit of the tree trunk that has a second layer, which I'd never noticed before. And he gets a rock and he bangs it. And because there's a gap, it makes a note.
Makes a big... Yeah.
And I was like, dude, this is genius. I had no idea. It was like, that's the way it needs. It was like, this is where my not-for-profit needs to go. That kind of capacity to connect with and listen and understand to that sort of genius, to see something afresh and to be friends with 6-year-olds inside hollow trees. I was like, it gave me all the answers I needed. Right. And then he said, do you know, all the grown-ups I meet inside this tree are very friendly. It's like, good.
I hope so.
I think it's probably a decent filter to find the good ones.
Yeah.
And then after that, the whole day unfolded, one thing after another, more of those sorts of things where I was like, I'm back on track. I understand again. And it was because I'd left the house, I'd followed my intuition, I was not on my phone, and I had dedicated the time to being free. Oh.
Keep having this problem. Hold on one
Yeah.
sec. I want to sort of segue from what we were just talking about and finding your inspiration, because you're now creating a community abroad. Are you? Is that still going ahead?
Yes. Yes.
It's flowing. It's fluid. It's moving
really
in and out.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
it is.
Is it happening still?
Yes.
Okay.
Why
the hesitation?
Because community is a really interesting noun to apply to it. It's not. I don't think community is quite the word, but that's an interesting thing for me to even think about. So,
what was, if not community, what was the...
A physical place.
Yeah.
So a physical place that is dedicated to experiences that are about wonder and meaning and creativity, and that functions a little bit like an artist residency in that people are invited and funded, hopefully, to come and create there, but that the version of the creativity that is brought back into the place is sometimes collaborative and sometimes individual, but is experience itself. So, for example, if you were to have a few different kinds of artists, like if you were to have a writer, a recording studio with a composer and a musician, whatever, somebody building a tree house, somebody else who's a chef, somebody else who's figuring out improv games, and somebody else who's, I don't know, creating perfumes.
Sure.
Each of those could potentially be like the paint palette for an experience. So somebody then comes and goes, I want to create a rite of passage for a group of teenagers. I'm going to draw upon the music from the composer, get the writer to write a narrative, get a scent journey happen. Do you see what I mean? Like build a place. So the idea being that it's an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary space, but those independent creative activities are also sometimes brought together in the service of an experience. Sure. And the second layer of this is that the experiences can be gifted. So where I'm at the moment is I'm working with an initial bunch of different partners to try a bunch of different experiments within that thing to build the partnerships.
So why does it need a base? Where did that come from? And
very
why
good
couldn't
point.
it be done? Why are you transitioning from sort of what you're doing now? And because it sort of feels like the next evolution of you, really. So why does it need its own space as opposed to being able to do it anywhere?
It's a very good point, and I think it's probably the sticking point, because you could argue that I've been doing this forever, and actually it's already happening because it's already very much, I am doing things for free, I am doing things that are gifted, I am brought into, like, that's experience is ephemeral, right? Experiences themselves are impossible to capture, but if they're rooted in place, if there's an analog aspect to it, if they also have a longevity to them, if they have a sort of, for me, it's a personal longing to be rooted in land. Like I live on a boat. My reality is water and metal and city. Unrooted. I am increasingly feeling like the antidote to that is something that feels like you have a very long event horizon. So you're going not just something that lasts a day or a month or a year, but something that is thinking through a century or more in terms of its actual meaning. And there's something about nature being a really crucial part of that map. So it's personal in that I want to shift from water and metal into stone and earth and wood and trees and animals and nature and the seasons and something other than... I love London and I love my boat and I love all of that, but it's very much, it's temporary. It's like you have to swim quite hard, not literally, one hopes, to stay in the same place. It doesn't go anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Like it's this kind of freelance city kind of...
And you've kind of experienced that already, because
I've been taking a while.
Well, also, like quite literally, you left the boat at one point and didn't think you'd come back, and then you did come back. So you sort of know what it's like to be rooted to somewhere and then come back into this life that, like, I quite like it. I like being on the move constantly. I traveled a lot and I lived in a bunch of different countries when I was younger, and I kind of missed that. That's one thing about acting that's a bit of a shame, is like I'd like the ability to just kind of go and just live in different places, but I kind of need to be here because I'm trying to build a career. That's a bit of a different thing. But you came back to the boat life, and now you're...
I did come back to the boat life.
Sort of slowly drifting out of boat
Not
life.
necessarily. I feel like I would like to keep the boat as a city solitary space of reflective practice. Like I love the boat. She is a person as far as I'm concerned, and she is my ally and my friend, and I love her.
Great.
So I don't want to lose the boat, but I like the idea of the satellite quality of the boat. My boat in particular has this almost like floating retreat vibe, you know, and I think for solitary work, she's perfect, but community and rootedness and trees and animals and stone and future feels like it needs a different, like this is kind of exhausting to maintain. I can't imagine being here when I'm 80. Do you know what I mean? There's a different level of depth, and also there is something about connecting with the other realms. There's something about being in the boat and being in a sort of primarily digital migratory workflow that keeps me here and like intuitive and emotional and intellectual. It's not very embodied. Like I can sit, we can have, like, most of my work is conversation. I'm kind of interested in the idea of something that becomes elemental in a different way. So the stage it's got to now is I have a founder, co-founder, and we are literally a day or two away from being able to set up the not-for-profit as an Estonian entity, because I'm pretty clear that this project is not happening in the UK. I now have dual citizenship, and it's in Estonia makes it easy to set up an organization. So setting up an Estonian not-for-profit and coming up with a bunch of partnership pilots that mean we're testing the theory of creating experiences as gifts and utilizing different thresholds for that experiment, all of which relate back to maybe how could this be made better for a place. So it's a question as opposed to, I mean, I have a personal longing for the place.
You know where it's going to be? No. The place.
The place.
Sure. Okay. So you're going there and you're going hunting. Are you just scouting locations until the place?
Haven't been on, no, not
yet. I know
yet.
you went there, but you weren't looking for...
Slovenia? Is that what you just said? What did you just say before?
No, I was just saying you went. What was the
Estonia?
Estonia. You did go to Estonia, but that was sort of an ancestry pilgrimage sort of a thing. But you didn't go there for location scouting.
No, I didn't even. I honestly had no sense of why I was going. No, I had Estonia. So my name Tiu is Estonian.
Yes.
I'd never been to Estonia, but my mother gave me the name Tiu because her parents fled before she was born during the Second World War when Stalin was running riot in there. So they never went back. She never went, ever. Right. She never even visited
You never
the
went
country.
with her?
It was communist.
Yeah.
It was basically, Nazi occupied. Stalin, Nazi, communist. And then finally it stopped being communist in like 1990 or 91. She died in 92. So she never went back. I never went back. I just had this sort of sense of, well, I've got a weird name and that's about it. And then I realised that Estonia has this really brilliant way of supporting foreign nationals to set up organisations. So if you want to set up something in Europe or something that is just like digital nomads use it a lot.
Right,
they have this really great kind of Estonian residency.
Because it makes me think of like the thing that's coming to my mind is like Italy. I know Italy it's open for people to go over there. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's like you can get a castle in Italy, but it's the whole thing of like they'll give you a house. Foreign people, they'll give them a house if they set up a business over there. So I don't know if it's a similar thing. Or...
No, it's not. It's more digital. So they were very, very far ahead of the curve in terms of everything being digitized, and they have therefore a completely nomadic capacity for people who want to set up companies. Can do so very easily. So the College of Extraordinary Experiences, for example, is an Estonian company.
Right.
Because it's one of the it's good for digital nomads who want to have a non-geographically located thing. So I just thought I'd go and have a look and see if I want to set up an organisation there. I'd quite like to meet, because you have to have somebody on the ground who's the accountant or whatever. I thought I'll just go and use it as an excuse to go and visit the land of my forefathers. And then when I got there, realised that if I could prove my ancestry, I was actually eligible for an Estonian passport, which then led to a whole thing about proving my ancestry, which led to me going into the archives and uncovering all this stuff around my grandparents, which was amazing. My grandfather was a painter and he died while my mother was pregnant with me, so I never met him. Like, extraordinary stories. Anyway, I now have a passport, but I haven't been back. So Estonia isn't necessarily the location of this place, but it is the location of the entity that will therefore become the not-for-profit, which I can use as the place to get funding and to run organise it, because I don't want to do something in post-Brexit Britain.
No, that's interesting. What? Why?
I'm deeply European. I don't have a drop of English blood. I feel, I mean, literally my name, Tiu de Haan, can you tell?
Yeah.
Like there's, I'm a Londoner though. Londoner through and through, but London is different because London is this like...
But London's not the place for that sort of a
No,
thing.
Exactly. And I don't want to live in rural England.
Yeah.
So therefore, somewhere else.
Do you go to different... Have you been or like learnt about people who have done similar things to this? I was telling you about Slava Polunin, the famous Russian clown. He's got Slava's Snow Show, which I heard about for the first time like 10 years ago. I think it's been running way longer than that.
It has.
I found some like footage of it online. There's like footage you can find on YouTube from like a French production of it, because it's the one thing that everyone has gone to, and it doesn't matter who it is, if they're a theatre person, not a theatre person, young or old, and they feel like a kid again. And it came here, I think, 2 years ago again. Like it tours basically around the world all the time, and I don't think he actually does it anymore because he's so old now, but he created a character that's sort of I can't remember what the name of the character is, but the main clown in the piece that he originated, and he's got people that it's sort of that ancient Russian theatrical tradition of like learning from the master, right? Where they would learn from a master to do a particular character, and they would just play that character until they were older, and then they would teach someone else, and then they would play that character. And so it's going around, and I went and saw it, and it's brilliant. But he's got a community somewhere in Russia, and it's for performers and artists and creatives, and I hesitate to call it Neverland, but it's sort of like a Neverland that you can escape to, and it's still there. It's this hub and community, this commune that he's built.
Love it.
It sounds like a similar thing.
So kind of, I'm less. I met Slava Polunin in the 90s.
Really?
Yeah, and I think I went to that show in the 90s.
Did you meet him at the show, or was it
no?
Because
it was a Tiu. No. My very, very first ever job, straight out of university, was running the green room on a talk show.
Right.
So my very first job, age 21, was making tea for celebrities all day long and being on my own with them.
And was this sort of leading to you doing the music thing? Was that a stepping stone?
It was a few steps before.
Okay, right.
Yeah, no, it was literally the first job out. No, I had already been singing, but it was never going to be a career at that point. No, I made tea for Slava Polunin.
Oh, wow. What was that
and
like?
went to his show. He was really grumpy.
Was he?
Yes. He was the classic thing where clowns are sort of it's so exhausting to constantly have to be the source of other people's joy, and you're in a really bad mood. Anyway, that's what
they say about clowns, is clowns are actually quite sad, but that's why we find them funny. Yeah,
because you've got to hold that tension all
Well, you're
the
sort of
time.
laughing at their pain all the time, and if you're really like, I think he's the best example more than anyone else of someone who's really, really present with people on stage, and that's what people like about the show is like he's genuinely there with them every time, and the show is like, it's very scripted and you have to hit your moments, but nonetheless it is clown, so you might just do something a little bit different. And the other clowns, I imagine, who aren't Slava are like, what are you doing, mate? Like, why are you doing this thing? We need to do the balloon bit next.
Slava. Sorry, spitting.
So yeah, a grumpy Slava. It wasn't the most inspiring.
I don't remember. It was a long time ago, but I do remember going, "Cheer up, mate!" You know,
to the most famous clown in the world.
Yeah, he was like, "Woo." Anyway. But yes, that place. There are some really interesting examples. There are artist residencies all over the world that have all sorts of different models.
Yeah.
There's also a whole bunch of crazy intentional communities, which I have a little bit more of an allergy to. I feel like...
Why?
They're just rife with problematic
Is it sort of the thing
clashes
where like you get different spiritual leaders, like what's the hot yoga Bikram?
Oh yeah,
Bikram-y thing where like it kind of becomes centered around a person, and you get your devotees.
I am wearing my...
We're ignoring that. We haven't even put on the atlas yet. It's going to get very weird. Well, why do you have an allergy to those?
Because they almost always fall foul of breaking down relationships that aren't. It's like if the reason for coming together is a bunch of well-meaning people, it's kind of bound to only go so far. If the reason for coming together is something to do with meaning or creativity, it overrides the personality stuff. It's why religions have lasted 1,000 years, but like culty things waver. So there's something for me about part of the experiment right now is finding the right partners who want to help to make this work. So that's where I'm at the moment.
You don't want it to be toxic before it actually gets off the
but it's
ground.
also an experiment. Like part of the other thing that I'm playing with is what is the, to use a religious term, covenant, which is an agreement that is what kind of sacred agreement are you entering into by doing this? And that is something I've never really tested. When I had my not-for-profit, over time, I was able to iterate and understand how to filter the way that it works so that it worked best, and how the right people came towards it, and what the board needed to be populated on, how we could have some agency in terms of who worked for it and what the families were invited to bring or not. But, like there were various different tests and found out the hard way sometimes by going, that's a bad idea. Like you can't have drugs here. You can't have, for example, it's like hadn't really made that stipulation until we were like, oh, somebody smuggled in. That's not okay.
You just don't know until sometimes you've just got to cross that bridge.
Exactly. Yeah. So there are certain things that need to be tested in terms of how do we avoid it becoming some nightmare intentional community where everyone's having 4-hour meetings about who's done the washing up or not. That is not my idea of a good time.
Imagine even having like a board. People sometimes say that you lose your autonomy in that sort of a situation. People talk about with like a business. Suddenly you've got all these people that you're responsible to.
That's right.
And then it just becomes something else entirely.
But it has to also, because it's a not-for-profit, that is actually deeply important. So there needs to be somebody to make sure that it isn't just the TU show. Also, I don't want it to die with me. So there's something about taking myself out of it and allowing it to be bigger than me. And therefore, I'm not the best person to be. I can be the source of it, or I can be the inspirer, I can be the magnet to get people to come and ideate. But if it ends up being the TU show, it's problematic. I cannot be Slava.
Which is really difficult because you're the one
because I'm
doing
amazing.
it all.
Because I've got the have you seen
Jedi
my
yoga voice. Yeah, it must be incredibly difficult to like there's that thing people talk about building something and then letting it go. I had movement teachers that they called it killing your baby. Right. And that was sort of in reference to like if you had a really good idea that you'd worked on for a really long time and maybe it didn't end up working for the final piece that you were trying to put on, that was killing your baby. But I feel like it also references to being able to let your babies go. And that must be a really difficult thing to do while you're still doing it. It doesn't exist yet, but you need to sort of extract yourself from the situation enough to put in all the work, but then just let it sort of have a life of its own, but also be careful that you don't fall into these other traps, like you say, other communes or artistic retreats might fall into. Yeah,
it's a fascinating challenge. And I've never done it before. So the problem with the not-for-profit was it was predicated on my skill set. And it meant that when I ran out of energy, basically I burnt out, it stopped because nobody else was going to carry it because I'd made it reliant upon me. And that was the big learning from that. It stopped because while I was running that not-for-profit, I was also caring for my dying dad. And when my dad eventually died, and like another year later, I finally was exhausted enough to be able to go, okay, I have to stop now. I couldn't then also fundraise. So it's like I had made something that was so necessary for me. I was the only person who knew every bit of that project.
Right.
And it was wonderful, but it wasn't set up to succeed. It was set up to be my baby. And that often happens with kind of people who have a really strong vision that they accidentally make it so that the vision cannot survive them. So this is a really interesting point of the design. And I'm right at that question now going, I don't know, I've never done this before, so I'm learning.
So you're pulling in like, are you pulling in a team, sort of like
I've got a team.
Like an Avengers top 6? Or like, do you need to find new people?
Yes.
The people that you find maybe like to because you need to balance the equation. You don't want 2 people maybe from the same sphere. You want people who can bring in different ideas.
That's right.
And how do you go about finding
I'm in that process right now. So I've developed a very top level summary, and I'm sharing that with a bunch of different potential partners and going, are you up for this? And so one of them is the conversation I had right before I came to see you, which is with this totally extraordinary, wonderful woman who's in Australia, whose name is Amy Firth. And she and I have been talking about a death related part of this and like ideating around getting funding to do living funerals, but also not just living funerals.
So we've got human-centered funerals and we've got
living funerals when the person whose funeral it would be is actually present and still alive.
Right.
Living wakes, they're also called. I've never done one, but more than that...
Well, you kind of have a little bit, no? Was that not part of your experience that you did?
For myself, the Odyssey...
Yeah, there was...
Wasn't a funeral.
No, there wasn't. Okay, I thought there was a funeral that was
I was 75 in it. That's another story. We should come back to that.
Yes.
When I was learning about ritual, one of my teachers was this extraordinary woman who's dead now called Sobonfu Some, who I cite I did a TEDx talk about 10 years ago about this, and I mention her. And one of the things that I learned from her, I did a grief ritual with her. She was the keeper of the ritual of the Dagara tribe of West Africa.
Okay.
And one of the things that they do is they honor the fact that we have much grief that we do not process. And often it's not just about dead people. It's often about, it could be an illness or a breakup or just a loss of sense of self or menopause or like any or late stage capitalism or a species that's gone extinct or just some unnamed sense of loss. And essentially our culture doesn't create space for that.
Do you know Joe Dispenza? As a
Yes,
brief tidbit, and he talks all about how grief and pain can manifest into cancers and things, and we literally have the power within our minds, our subconscious, to give ourselves horrible diseases, but also to get ourselves out of those situations. And there's people who have lived their whole lives with a certain maybe physical, often talks about like medical problems, and they can get themselves out of that place. So I imagine that's somewhat related to holding on to that grief. Or
I have a slight issue with that thesis in that it slightly victim shames. It makes the person who has cancer responsible for their cancer, which I think is an additional layer of weight for the person. I'm not saying if it's empowering, awesome. If it's sort of going, well, you made yourself sick, I personally feel like it's a funny balance, that one. So I mean,
there's obviously outside influences that cause. It's not that I don't think people want to put themselves into pain, but sometimes they just do, or sometimes something happens and they just spiral.
Of course, and I do think that there is a psycho-emotional correlation to wellness. I really, really do. But I also have like a friend whose 6-month-old baby had cancer. It's like I don't think
no,
you know what I mean. Like there is certain layers of that I think are problematic, but there's no doubt that unexpressed emotion can manifest in different ways. So regardless of whether you're doing it as like physical spring clean, which is reason enough, or if you're just doing it because we have found ourselves in the most complicated times imaginable without much recourse to process anything other than stare at our phones and doom scroll, which doesn't help, or exercise or numb out through alcohol or sex or porn addiction or drugs or whatever. It's like all of these things that soften the noise don't actually get it out of your system. So the Dagara tribe have this grief ritual, which they would do every month. And 72 hours long. It's quite a palaver. Right. And essentially it's set up so that you can experience grief for all of these things and be witnessed in your grief and allow it to move through. I won't go into all the details of the ritual. But I then interviewed her, and she told me that in her culture, when somebody dies, not only do they have this 72-hour grief ritual for the whole community just around the person, they also reenact the entire life of the person that has died as a theatre piece. So they would have somebody play the person who's died at different ages and help the community to process what their life story was and what their message was. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that.
I can't remember, is it Mexico where they do the full, is it like a day long or like 3 days long reenactment of the crucifixion? You know about this?
Yes.
And they actually nail people to the cross.
Yes.
I remember seeing it when I was
the
a kid.
Philippines. I know they do it in the Philippines.
Yeah, I think it's Mexico, like South America as well, where they there's the whole audience that sits outside for like a full day and they reenact that. But that's fascinating that they reenact every single person that's died. They reenact their life.
within that culture, it's the details of exactly how much it happens, I don't know, but I think just that creative invitation to me is like, this is amazing. Imagine that you had to have a funeral which was also the entire story of your life, and how amazing would it be to be there when that's happening. So this conversation with this Amy Firth woman was around that. It was like, how could we combine a complete honouring of that particular tradition with a living funeral? So that's what we were ideating around. Because
so that's not a living funeral. That's different from a living funeral.
I'm making this shit up, man. Like I'm literally
You're
like
making it up all the time.
all the time. And like pulling from, for example, this Dagara tribe ritual, but honouring that is something which we would be appropriating and going, how can we honour that, learn from it, but also put it into relation with our way of facing death. Anyway, so I've already been speaking to her about, she's got somebody there who wants to do it. I want to offer it to the undertaker who I learned from, because I was like, you do everybody else's funerals.
Yeah.
Should we do yours?
Yeah.
But also just to experiment with, how do you create experiences that have this like long arc, and how do you then turn that into something that celebrates what you have to look forward to? I mean, I've designed my own funeral, obviously. Have you designed yours by any chance?
No, I've not written a will or anything.
No. But wills are more like practical. Like the funeral bit is like, what tunes would you want? Where would you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
yeah. No, I've not done any of that.
No, it's fine. You've got a way
have
ahead.
You got, what music have you got playing at yours?
I have 3 bits of music.
Yeah.
One is a song by Sufjan Stevens called "All the Trees of the Field Will Clap Their Hands." One is a Georgian singer, not the state of Georgia, but the country Georgia, a guy called Hamlet Gonashvili, who is, I think, one of the most. He also died falling out of an apple tree, which I just like about the man.
Yeah.
Not that you can control that kind of thing, but just say. And there's a traditional Georgian song called Sinskaro, which is so beautiful.
Is it orchestral? Is it?
It's just voices.
Voices.
Yeah. It's very melancholic and very beautiful. And then Pachelbel's Canon in D minor.
Great.
Which was, my mum always called it hugging music. So we have to put it on and have very, very, very long hugs, uncomfortably long for anybody else. So that's going to be part of the of my funeral. Is everyone having to have an uncomfortably long hug.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. But so that's one example of a partnership. So we're having this conversation around how do we design something, and how powerful would it be if there were also, in this place that I'm imagining, a place which is ultimately where I'm going to die and be buried. She says, quite excited.
So, okay, are you going to be performing a living funeral as well
for myself?
For this?
What?
Do you want to be a part of this? Do you want to have a living funeral for?
I feel like I've had I think it would be a bit greedy.
Yeah.
I feel like
You've had a few?
I've had a few. I really have. But I mean, I'm not averse to it. I'm sure in a couple of decades, I'll be like, okay, time for another one. But no, at this point, I think I've been maxed out.
Yeah.
Shall I speak to that? Shall I talk about the Odyssey?
I was going to ask you about that. Did that feel in any way like a living funeral, or was that a different experience? And do please explain to people what that was, because it's mental.
We're talking about. Yeah. It is mental. Okay, Odyssey Works is an American organisation. This is their 25th year. They have been creating transformative experiences for an audience of one for 25 years. Their model used to be, it's slightly changed now, that they would open applications once a year to people to fill in an incredibly intense application form with very interesting and very probing questions. And then out of the people who completed that form, they would pick one, and that person would be researched to within an inch of their life, interviewed multiple times. They would be asked to submit contact details for friends and family who the people would also go and interview.
Sure.
They would start eating your favorite food and watching your favorite films and going to your favorite places if that was possible, and like immersing themselves in that person's life.
Right.
And then they would get a group of multidisciplinary artists together, and then they would create an experience for that person. And that person's experience would be designed so perfectly to be attuned to their particular story and their challenges and their questions and their impulses and their blocks, that it was just perfectly configured to take them through whatever transition was present for them, or whatever transformation felt right.
If you don't mind speaking to that, what transformation were you going through at the time?
So I was just turning 50. And so my mum died at 49. So it's like, plus I was, feeling increasingly like this chapter was coming to an end, and I hadn't yet figured out how I could transform into the place-based chat. So the boat, city, single, solitary, ephemeral bit, moving towards the elder that I hope to become, which is somebody who is, I mean, the white hair's definitely coming on very strongly, which is good. I'm into it. But there's a sort of the rootedness, that me being in my power and in my legacy and rootedness, and
you just sound more and more like yoga the more you speak. I think he lives in a tree in that I'm not that familiar with Star Wars. Just call me Hot Yoda. Yeah, just wearing a cloak, living in a tree, waiting for children to come along so you can teach them your ways.
I am Yoda. Did you know that Yoda and Miss Piggy are the same voice?
I did know that. Yeah.
I am both.
Can you do a Miss Piggy?
I am.
You are Miss. Sorry,
I am.
I'm mistaken.
Yoda Piggy. Anyway, yes. So the transition I was in was the shifting out of like 0 to 49 being one major chapter, and then everything ahead of that being kind of unknown, and also like letting go of having children and just all of the things that come with this transition point, you know. So that was part of it for me. And so I was the recipient of this experience.
Yes.
I applied and I received. And I never thought I was going to receive. I just did it because I wanted to fill in the form, because it's such a good form. And then they picked me. And then I had many months of being interviewed, and my friends that I introduced them to being interviewed about me, and then I was taken through an experience that I won't go into in detail right now. There is another podcast; it's 2 hours long. that tells the story.
You wrote about it. People can find that.
Yeah, but it was my Odyssey, and I then taught on so Odyssey Works have an experience design certification program where they teach nascent experience design, not nascent, they teach experience designers partly not how to make Odyssey so much, but like the art of designing with empathy. And I was on their faculty last year, and they're about to, this year, they've got their Odyssey is happening this summer, and we're figuring out what my relationship with it is now. And I feel like they feel like a potential partner. We're figuring out the rules around who brings what, but I'm quite into the idea of being the afterlife for the person whose Odyssey it is. No pressure. I don't know if that's what's going to be needed, but that's my sense is, my experience was a lot of energy put into the run up and the transformation, and then the aftermath not being as carefully curated. So I'm like, that is something that now that I'm moving into my third chapter or whatever. I mean, I anticipate many chapters, but third, I don't know.
You're going to come back as a blue Jedi ghost at some point and just haunt everyone. Did you find that after that, it was a 3-day experience?
It was 72 hours.
72-hour experience. Did you find coming out of that you had figured it all out, or are you looking for the aftermath because maybe there was a bit of processing that needed to happen after that experience?
The latter. It took a while. And honestly, I feel like I'm still slightly thinking, I thought that there would be an external shift quickly. And then there hasn't been. And if anything, it was quite jarring to go through something that extraordinary and then find myself watching Netflix. I was like,
staring at your phone.
I'm still on the boat and I'm still going to the gym and I'm still watching Netflix. It's like, surely by now I should be under a tree somewhere in another country. And it didn't. So it was a bit jarring that it didn't have that momentum afterwards. It was,
It's what I find really fascinating about. I've got a couple of friends that have traveled to South America and done ayahuasca ceremonies.
Okay.
And it's something I really, really want to do at some point. I find it fascinating.
Why do you want to do it?
Because I think a lot of people, everyone I've spoken to that's done it, everyone I've heard about that's done it, learns something about themselves.
For sure.
It's almost like, it's like what you're talking about with grief. There's something that people need to process that they maybe can't or don't know how to process. And it almost forces you to, because you go for a 7 to sometimes 15-day experience and you do it over and over again. And I can't remember there's like a drink or some sort of an intoxicant or drug or whatever it is that you take before that you need to purge yourself, almost clean yourself out before you can experience that. And I think the first time you have ayahuasca, you don't break through. People take it and they just feel a bit spacey, and then it's the second or third time, because they do it maybe not every day, but every other day they sit and have a ceremony, and it's the second or third time that people tend to break through, and different people will experience whatever it is they need to learn, and they learn from the person they need to hear it from most. So often Catholics will go and they meet Jesus Christ and he will tell them whatever they need to hear, or whatever particular religion. Or if you don't have a religion like me, it's just maybe the universe or some other supernatural being. Yes, hello, you Tom. Will come through. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. Traveled across the world just to speak to you in a Yoda voice for 14 hours.
Call me up.
Yeah. And you learn whatever it is you need to learn. And I'm fascinated to kind of be forced into that experience and learn whatever it is about myself that I need to learn, because I don't know what it is, essentially.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated by that. And I think that's probably the most extreme you can do. I guess people, they equate them to near-death experiences as well. Often people will learn something about themselves, which is why I'm fascinated about that. But particularly, I'm interested in people who go and have that experience and they learn something about themselves, and then a year later they're doing exactly what they were doing before, and you kind of just slot back in if you don't sort of like practice those techniques and like put into practice, your morning pages or whatever it is you've learned from that experience. You will just, because the brain needs to fire and then the brain needs to wire. And it's that thing that I think they say that like if you practice something for about 6 months, you'll root it into your being. I think people usually talk about going to the gym, and it's like, the New Year's thing. It's like January, I'm going to start going to the gym. And then suddenly by February, nobody's going to the gym anymore. It's the same people you saw from November that are going to the gym. You really need to put into the practice of your daily life that thing, whatever it is you learnt, no matter how big or small. Otherwise, you will just go back to that.
Yeah. Novelty doesn't necessarily allow things to perpetuate. It's interesting what you say, though. Like I've never taken ayahuasca, and I'm not particularly interested in taking ayahuasca. It doesn't appeal to me personally. Sure. I'm actually, I worked on a whole really interesting project with a computational physicist, an academic who had created this VR experience around connecting as energy bodies, but doing it from a scientifically accurate perspective. Okay. And while I was working on that, and it was in parallel with people doing research into psychedelics. Right. So I wasn't. It didn't have any psychedelics, but there was this extraordinary report that was written about it, which I'm cited on as a co-author, where they used the same metrics after this particular VR experience that they were using for psychedelic experiences. Right. So they're going, having had a psychedelic experience on a scale of 1 to 10, I can't remember any of the specific questions, but something along the lines of, did you have a sense of mystical awakening, for example? Like,
were they trying to recreate the experience in the VR?
What was interesting was the results said that they outstripped drugs by quite some measure. The experience they were trying to create in the VR was to connect with your energy instead of your body. So when you were in school and you were learning about chemistry, you had stick and ball models. Like you'd go, this is what the unit of oxygen looks like. And you go, ball, stick, whatever. Imagine that model made of light.
Okay.
And imagine that floating in the air between us, and you could manipulate it. So with VR, you could grab one of the bits and stretch it out and see how it behaves. So this was a working model to understand molecular structures and how they would operate in their purest form. So the first iteration of it was like, how do we turn molecular structures into living entities and play with them?
Sure.
Then there was an artist's rendering of the same thing. So instead of it just being a grey square with a stick and ball model floating in the space, you're in like a sort of weird dusk landscape. And the stick and ball model, instead of looking like stick and ball, looked like fairy lights that were living. And then the you that was in that space was a light blob, like a cloud form with a heart that were lit up and hands that lit up. And you could see each other as these light cloud bodies, and this molecular structure was floating between you. So imagine that you and I now have floating
Go on, get it on. We talked about it too much.
Here we go with the actual other piece of my working wardrobe. It's very important.
We made it.
We made it. They turn on.
And like, do they turn on individually as well?
Of course. This is what I actually wear to the office. So imagine that this is now floating between us, which it now is. But imagine it's a string, and imagine
you can manipulate that.
But imagine we're in different places. So imagine you're in America and I'm in London, but it feels exactly like we're sitting at this table and we've got this thing floating between us, and we can hear each other speak.
Right.
But we're only seeing our form as a blob of light. And when you're in that environment and you don't know somebody's age or race or gender sometimes or anything about them, you're responding to them in quite a different way. And when you're bonded by this playfulness within this molecular structure, it's quite extraordinary. Yeah. So that project I was part of creating and wrote a script around it and took people through this whole journey. And part of what we learned when we tested it was that people came out of it going, I no longer fear death. It's like, that's not an outcome that was expected.
Yeah, but that's the wrong answer. We weren't supposed to.
They were really, because it was like they suddenly connected to a part of themselves that was not bound by this solid corporeal form, but was still themselves. Right. They're like, one person came out of the test period and went, that's what my dad looks like. It's like, oh, how beautiful. So then it migrated into this other thing going, okay, how do we test that? Right. So people came out of this experience and were asked to fill in questionnaires. And the questionnaires included questions that had been taken from the studies they were doing at Imperial at the time, which was about psychedelics and their impact on mystical experiences, on depression, on mood, on all that stuff. Turns out that our thing scored higher than LSD. Right. Lower than DMT, but like considerably higher than ecstasy, for example. And suddenly it was like, well, hang on, by all of these, they're a bit clunky to put numbers on this kind of thing. But like by this measure, this outstrips drugs, but you don't take any drugs. Hang on a minute. And so that became the beginning of another iteration where they started to work with the psychedelic researchers as like, how do you get into those altered states without taking drugs? How do you connect with something that is bigger than you without having any of these? So again, just to come back to your, like the journey that you're interested in going on, I feel like I'm not, because I feel like I've done a lot of, not psychedelics, but I've explored a lot of magical awareness without the drugs getting you there, VR being, that particular project being one of the ways, but also many other much smaller shifts. And my interest is in grounding it here. How do you experience it in this reality? How do I go for a walk on a Sunday afternoon and receive the beautiful instruction from a 6-year-old boy inside a hollow tree, that a tree that I thought I knew actually contained a drum? That's where I'm much more lit up.
I feel like you've had enough of that exploration, and you already know how to find that connection with people when most people don't know how to do that. So they're looking for that connection or whatever it might be.
That's it. So I'm the other way.
Yeah.
I want to bring it more, I want to ground it as opposed to, I'm already off with the fairies. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't need any more.
I think that's what you want, though. That's the sort of like the witch woman of the tribe or whatever, or the, whatever it is, the tribal elder who's gone through that experience and kind of like has that crazy, sometimes psychopathic knowledge to be able to sort of like rewind that and contain it and then dispense knowledge to other people.
Yeah. Or even just, honestly, the work I do is less about dispensing knowledge and more about inviting people to explore how they connect with their own. I mean, like the majority of people who come to me one-to-one, I simply set them up with practices that they end up being able to do without me. That's the point. Like they if they are able to access their joy, their wonder, their intuition, job done.
Sure.
It's like I can give them my experience and my tips and my tools and my provocations, and I can support them in an exploration around that. But it's not so much disseminating knowledge as going, you just need to get rid of the stuff that's in the way of your knowing, which is, again, back to this thing about it's not a religion. I can't, if I were bringing a religion into it, I'd be going, there is knowledge. This is the knowledge. Let me teach you the knowledge. I'm going, let's assume that you are, when you are fully present, you actually can access what you need. So how do we get rid of the rest of the stuff that's in the way of that and get you back into your center? Because I'm not going to lead, you're going to lead. Yeah.
I'm curious as well how you find that in an ever-changing world. We were speaking just before the podcast and you said you could speak a little bit to the ever-changing world and particularly AI, and I'm curious how that affects you and your work and how that affects your clients, and what is it like to be a part of a world that is ever changing and trying to fit that into it.
The beauty of the kind of stuff that I do is, honestly, a robot will never, ever be able to do it. I don't think a robot will ever be able to sit by a fire and cry.
Do you think they're trying to? Are there any robots trying to get into your sphere of ritual design or whatever you want to call it now?
Actually, there are. There's a really interesting report where there's a Japanese Zen robot monk.
Right.
I don't know enough to say more than that, but like
do you know, is it like a physical robot or is it just an
so.
AI? You don't? No, that's all you know.
I think it's a physical robot, and I can't remember the detail, but I think it's like a Shinto. I know. I think there's a Shinto temple in Japan where they've experimented with this idea of automating the practice to be robot based. But on the whole, it's actually, if anything, it's highlighting the schism that actually when AI can take over all of these other things, there are certain elemental, sensual, heart-centered, human-centered things that are absolutely fundamental to how we connect as human beings, and which I think will become increasingly more precious as the digital stuff overtakes so many of the things that we didn't think it would, like creativity and so on. It's like actually love, death, birth, sitting under a tree, being able to share a moment of like sharing breath, sharing tears, being able to feel rooted, and like that is not replaceable. And my strong sense, and this is something which I'm again, red car, I'm looking for evidence to support this, but I think it's true. There is a split. There is a split where if you're looking at companies that are AI driven, obviously massive increase in everything to do with that. But equally, not opposite, but equally, there is analog. There is a desire for, handwritten letters, for meeting in person instead of on Zoom, for gardens, for allotments, for just stuff that is the absolute antithesis. And so, in fact, there was a thing I went to recently, which was an evening for analog founders, because it was like founders of analog businesses are actually in a unique, the weirdly modern, modern trend.
What are we talking about? Like shops?
No. More like retreat cabins.
Oh, right. Okay.
Something that cannot ever be replaced by an online experience. A log cabin in the middle of a magical land isn't ever going to be replicable. I mean,
a MetaQuest log cabin might be just the thing.
But it's not. That's the point. Like, I have one, you know what I mean? But there's something about this thing, like anything that, basically there's this really interesting argument. You know Yuval Noah Harari?
Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
So in Homo Deus, which is brilliant, there's a whole thing about the rise of the motor car and how at the time that cars came in, they were initially competing with people who had horses. So horses are fallible, they fall sick, they get lame, they die, they have emotions, they get attached, they experience fear. They're basically not as efficient.
Right.
And so there was a point where most people had horses, a couple of very rich people had cars. Gradually, cars became much more common, and horses were therefore then relegated to the luxury market.
Sure.
So I think the same thing is happening around us. So the stuff that can be replicated and automated and made more efficient will increasingly take over the mainstream, leaving this preciousness around things that are flawed, things that are mortal, things that are human or animal or natural or tangible. Like there's going to be, I think, as we get increasingly swept up in the whole AI thing, there will be more and more value put on things that are not made with AI, like moments that cannot be replicated or even captured, things that are tangible, analog, and, you know, crafting to balance, whatever, like stuff that has a absolutely solid human or natural or animal footprint will become the horses to the motor cars. And I'm hopeful that is actually a helpful thing to, I'm not saying it's going to be wonderful getting there, but as we need more nourishment and community and healing and connection and creativity and joy and wonder, all of that stuff remains animal and human and natural. And I'm grateful to be in that part of the world.
Yeah, I struggle to see how ritual design could become AI or robotic.
I mean, AI could definitely inform. You could put the instruction. The only thing I use AI for is note taking. I don't use ChatGPT.
I think it's useful, but it's a tool like anything else.
Yeah. And I actually really I really feel quite anti it. So
I feel like that makes sense for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
right?
go bang on a tree with a rock. Who needs ChatGPT?
No, but really, like I genuinely feel that way. I feel like the part of me that writes morning pages connects with that sort of altitude, that sort of voice of understanding. Obviously it's everywhere, but it also feels like it's dumbing down things and it gets things quite wrong. And like when I'm working with people who occasionally I've been sort of ideating around this not for profit, and I've had stuff come back at me and it's clearly somebody's used AI and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. It sounds also,
it's called hallucinating. Is when like people like students are using it to write their papers, and it will just make up a fact. And it's like Napoleon was fighting in the American Civil War in the 1800s, and you go, no, he wasn't. And you're like, right? No, actually, you're right. He wasn't. He was actually doing this other thing, and it might just hallucinate again. So I find it's a useful. I think if you use it like Google, where you can look things up, but then you need to go and like cross-reference with other things. It sometimes speeds up or automates a process that might otherwise take a little bit longer. But it's a tool like anything else, and I think the fact that it's kind of taking over everything is a bit of a problem. But I find it similar in the acting industry. People go, we were talking about like Netflix and its partnership with OpenAI and how it's like a $5 million, $1 billion, I can't remember, deal. Where they're going to start to use it in movies more. And I don't think it's going to be the thing where you go to the cinema and like, yeah, cinema's going away as well. I think it's been going away for a while, but I don't think it's going to be the thing where you go to the cinema and all the posters you see are going to be completely AI movies. I think it'll probably help and make things a bit less expensive.
But don't you think there'll be a cachet in saying this is a completely human-made thing? Like there will be some sort of... There'll be a seal of approval if you can go through all the process and say no AI was involved in the making of this thing.
I think for the people who are involved in that industry who appreciate that sort of a thing, I think people who aren't actors or filmmakers or directors or, you know, sound people, sound technicians, I don't think people care. I think people just want to watch a movie. They just want to go on Netflix and they want to have Netflix recommend. Now there's like, I can't remember what it was, if it was like Alexa or something else. It was a horrible advert I watched the other day where you can go, Alexa, I'm with the family, give us a fun movie to watch. And now it's the thing where people aren't even choosing what they want to watch. They're just having the algorithm recommend to them. So I don't think the majority of people actually care.
I don't know if I agree with you. I think there's a sort of weird, I don't know. I've always talked about this with a friend, and her kid, who's 9 or 10, has an absolute allergy to any. So if they're scrolling together, which they do sometimes, fun, he will apparently go, "That's AI slop." Hate it. He hates it.
It's hard to pick out. Like I was sending Neela things on Instagram. It was one of those like compilations of veterans coming home and their dogs jumping on them. And I was like, oh, it's so sweet. And I sent it to her, and she was like, "That's AI." And I was like, "What?"
I know.
She was like, "That's AI."
I know.
And I was like, "Fuck."
I know.
I like it. I like AI when you know it's AI. There's these videos going around of like Queen Elizabeth fighting Stephen Hawking in WWE championships, and I just think that's the funniest thing. Or like Jesus Christ winning a skateboarding competition,
Obviously.
and he goes down a massive ramp and comes up into the sky and does like loads of flips and then comes back down. I find that incredibly entertaining. I don't like when it's something that I could otherwise enjoy that doesn't need to be AI, you know?
I also just find the fact that we're already in scarce water situations. I find it terrifying that it will be responsible for everybody dying of thirst. I think that's insane. Sorry, that's over dramatic. I take that back.
What, because of like power stations using water for...
Because of the water consumption that it utilizes.
Yeah.
It guzzles water like nothing else. And we are already in a world where water is beginning to become
I think Google's like
scary.
setting up their own nuclear power generator just for their AI like data station, because it sucks up so much power. They need to create their own nuclear generators just for that. So that's a different thing. It's
all part of a lot of broken pieces.
Yeah, I do. I think I agree with you though in that I do think people. Whereas AI will be used for films and music and everything else, I think there will be more of a need to watch human created things or human animated things as opposed to digitally rendered.
I'm actively like I've made a presentation about this place that I'm kind of activating, and one of the people I showed it to said, you need to say that all of the photos in this are from real experiences, because otherwise people assume they're not. Oh my God, that's so true. Yeah. I need to literally say, this was a weekend where this happened, and this was a moment when I need to now be explicit about the fact that I haven't faked anything, which in itself becomes a selling point, which is bizarre to me. But I mean, I'm actually, one of the other things I'm ideating around is how to communicate this idea in a way that is in keeping with the actual principle of the thing. And I've come up with this potential collaboration with different artists and a way of making it an analog series of things that happen in the life of the person in order for the story to unfold. Okay. Again, you can't have AI involved in that other than to maybe, pull together a sequence that could work. But this is just to hark all the way back years ago when I had this not-for-profit. One day I received a phone call that said, if you want to play, look at this URL and then harp. Didn't know who it was. Looked at the URL and all it said was, if you want to play, tie a green ribbon to the bench outside your apartment. Okay. So I was like, all right. Yeah. So I then went to a haberdasher's and bought a green ribbon, tied it to this bench and then waited. And then a 6-month experience unfolded where I was receiving messages, and I had to look in the window of the newsagent, and in amongst the ads for a sofa there'd be a note that was for me, or I'd get a text from a number I didn't recognize saying, go to this address. I'd go to the address, go into the garden, go into the shed. I'd go into the shed, and there was a balloon. I had to pop the balloon. Inside the balloon was a piece of paper, and that kind of thing. It went on for 6 months. It was my co-founder, but we still pretend to this I don't know who that was. We still, it was so magical because she had a key to my. Not only did she have a key to my home, but she also had a key to the lockup where we had all the kit for my thing. She would hide stuff in my house. I would kind of. I found in my record collection there'd be a letter inserted. It was just brilliant. So I love that. I love the idea of there being a sort of sense of some intervention that is completely analog. So I'm going all the way towards heartbeats and huggable things and earthbound things that are going to be the calm, clear space to balance all the rest of the digital crazy.
It's all very exciting stuff. Yeah. Where can people find you and your work and eventually your space that they can come to? Yeah.
My website is my name, which is just tiudehaan.com. I'm on Instagram at Tiu de Haan and then the digit 1. The place's working title is Wonderworks. There is no website at the moment, but I do have a few domain names, and I think it will be wonderworkshq.com, but there is nothing there. That's just a domain name that I've got.
For now,
Tiu de
Haan.
tiudehaan.com is the best way to find me.
People can follow you and track you down in Estonia at some point.
It won't be in Estonia, I don't think. No. I think Estonia will be where the company is, but I don't think that's the place.
Okay.
I think it's somewhere else.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm looking forward to
it.
But
if anybody's got a monastery that they want to,
I'm so excited to turn up with a hammer and just start putting things together. I can't wait.
Okay.
Amazing.
Deal.
Amazing.
Oh, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.